Do you love TV shows? We do too. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Anna, and we're the hosts of We Judge a Show by Its Pilot, a podcast hosted by us, a married couple with an endless love for TV.
Whether you're searching for a new favorite series or ready to revisit an old classic, we're here to guide you through an infinite world of TV shows.
Each episode, we watch and discuss the pilot for shows while also sharing personal stories that parallel the storyline.
So if you're tired of endlessly scrolling and not sure what to watch next, tune in and let us do the searching for you.
We Judge a Show by Its Pilot. New episodes every Tuesday and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Your new favorite show is just one click away. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our pod.
Hello.
My goodness.
I'm so tired.
It's been a long day. It's been a long day. It's been a long day for you. That wasn't a rub it in your face moment. That was just, I'm not going to sit here and act like I had a rough day.
Yes.
Yeah, you've had a lot of work stuff to do, and then we had to go run errands, and you had to come back and do more work stuff, and then
teach a class,
and then you had to do more work stuff, and then I made dinner, and we have been watching TV, and then we were like, we have to record.
I said
I always feel bad when I'm like, we have to record, and I know that you're tired. I know it's like kind of why you're always like leaving it up to me when you know I'm tired and we need to record. And I was kind of like giving you an out unless you wanted to.
No, because tomorrow we're getting Franklin.
We are.
And it's going to be crazy. And God only knows what is going to happen with work tomorrow when I wake up. So I was like, if we at least record tonight, I will not feel guilty if something comes up and we can't do it tomorrow. Because we also have to go to New Orleans for our Sanger monthly date night.
We're going to see Anne Juliet.
Yes,
and,
very excited.
Yeah, so by the time this comes out, we'll have already seen it.
Do you want to know something that finally hit me? And maybe I should have known this all along, all these 35 plus years since it came out. You know the movie I love, Valley Girl?
Yeah.
With Nicolas Cage and Deborah Foreman.
Yep.
I never really realized that their names were R and J.
Oh, yeah.
Randy and Julie, and that it was a spin, I'm going to guess, off of Romeo and Juliet.
Right. I mean, essentially
I'm pretty slow.
Well, no, I never thought about that. I never thought about the R and J part of it, but I mean, just the two young lovers from different worlds and everyone's keeping them apart. It's very Romeo and Juliet. Yes. I mean, like they've had, not every, but, so many teen and young romantic movies and books. It's all essentially Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah. I mean, they don't die at the end. I guess I kind of knew that, but then even the R and the J of their names. Yeah,
I never thought about that. Yeah. There was a movie and it's funny that those were the names because there was a movie with Joshua Jackson in the 90s, and I think they were trying to do like a family film because Romeo plus Juliet was really popular in the 90s with Leo and Claire Danes.
Yeah.
And so they made another one. I think it was really called like Ronnie and Julia or something that. It was like a TV movie, I'm pretty sure, because it was Joshua Jackson. Yeah. And it was just like Romeo and Juliet, but it was like set in modern times. They just didn't use the Shakespeare dialogue like Romeo plus Juliet did.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just said R and J, which made me think of that. I'm like, yeah, they've done that so many times. Like it's just been done, except they don't die at the end. Spoiler alert: Romeo and Juliet die at the end.
Yes.
But yeah, Anne Juliet's going to be interesting because it kind of poses the question of what if one of them had lived, particularly Juliet.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the whole play is about, but they use it's a jukebox musical and it's all pop music.
Oh, okay.
It's not just 90s because originally I thought it was just 90s music, but it's all pop music, popular. Starting with, I'm sure there's like Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears and all that. So it should be fun. It's gonna be songs that we know. So
Gotcha.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
I like jukebox musicals for that reason. Sometimes when we go see a musical that we're not familiar with the songs, I tend to not be as interested because I'm just gonna flat out say some of the musicals we've seen, the songs have been really bad, and it would just have been better if they just made it a play. I will say I was very impressed with Mrs. Doubtfire. I was very impressed. I loved Beetlejuice. But there are others where I'm just like, man, y'all really weren't trying that hard when y'all were writing these songs.
And I really will say that I love when they don't have an intermission and it's an hour and 90. I mean, it's a total of 90 minutes. It's an hour and a half. And it's done. I feel like the second act a lot of times is what's really disappointing in a musical. And you're just like, we didn't need this part.
Yeah.
So we'll see this one.
Yeah. And there's a show that we are going to be covering in February. That's a musical. So we can talk all about musicals for that episode.
Okay.
Which I'm really excited about. But today we are doing we're not doing a musical, even though we just talked about it. Talked about one. So we are continuing January with New Beginnings and Fresh Start, and we are covering a show that is new because we tend to do a lot of shows that aren't current just to make it easier for us because it's harder to, I don't know, maybe cover a show that is still ongoing and we're not sure of what's going to happen, but I think it makes it more interesting when we do the current shows because we don't know. That's what makes it interesting, I guess. Because, I mean, the show's still ongoing. We're talking about Ginny and Georgia, a show that I guess isn't super popular. I mean, we watched the season 1. And
I know a few people that have watched it.
It's just, I mean, like we've said before, there are just so many shows, particularly on Netflix. I mean, like, it's hard to, especially when, this one hasn't been around as long. But, so we're going to talk about some stuff, but before we do that, Anna's going to give us some episode and series information.
All right. Ginny and Georgia pilot. Ginny and Georgia is an American comedy drama series that was released on Netflix on February 24th, 2021. The second season premiered on January 25th, 2023. Shortly after the second season was released, the series was renewed for a third and fourth season. Filming for season 3 wrapped a few months ago, so it should be released sometime this year. The series was created by Sarah Lampert, who also wrote the pilot, and was directed by Anya Adams. It's been said that Lampert wanted to create a series about a young mother and a teenage daughter, but unlike shows like Gilmore Girls, she wanted a show where the characters make mistakes, suffer the consequences, and try to better themselves even when things get really messy.
I noticed that's the huge difference.
Yeah. Ginny and Georgia revolves around the titular characters, who are mother and daughter, as they navigate life in a new town while also hiding from their past. The cast includes Brianne Howie as Georgia Miller, the free-spirited matriarch, Antonia Gentry as Ginny Miller, Georgia's intelligent teenage daughter, Diesel La Taraka as Austin Miller, Georgia's younger son and Ginny's half-brother, who's an avid Harry Potter fan.
Super cute.
Jennifer Robertson as Ellen Baker, the Miller's neighbor and Georgia's friend, Felix Mallard as Marcus Baker, Ellen's rebellious son, Sarah Weisglass as Max Baker, Marcus's fraternal twin sister and Ginny's best friend, Scott Porter as Paul Randolph, the town's mayor, and Raymond Black as Joe, the owner of the Blue Farm Cafe. You can currently watch the entire series on Netflix.
So what's fun about this one is we have covered shows so Jennifer Robertson was in Schitt's Creek. Scott Porter was in Friday Night Lights. He played Jason Street.
Okay.
Jennifer Robertson played Jocelyn Schitt. And then Raymond, I guess it's a black, and then Sarah Weisglass were both on Degrassi: The Next Generation. Aww. So we're kind of cross referencing all these different shows.
Gotcha.
Which is nice, which is fun. It's kind of fun when you start catching that now. Like, oh yeah, we've done this. Cast has so many people of shows that we've done.
Yeah,
and I guess that's what also makes it fun doing more current
and
shows.
I think that's what's kind of with Netflix is that there were all of these shows in the vault that sort of came out during the pandemic because there wasn't filming happening, and I think streaming, studios and just regular studios were like, well, we have all this stuff, we might as well just put it out there, and some things became really popular. So
So we watched the first season of this show when it first came out. I remember as soon as we started watching the first episode, I'm like, I remember everything. I was just like, it's not that it was a easy show to remember. The plot wasn't super complicated, which I'm going to be honest, I really appreciated. I really like it that we haven't watched this show in almost 4 years. and as soon as you watch the first episode, I'm like, I remembered everything that happened, like in the whole season 1, and I really appreciate that because I really don't like it when shows get too complicated. So why do you think we never watched the second season? I remember when the trailer came out, and I remember we watched the trailer, and
well, I think it's again
we just never watched it.
Suffering from it came out 2 years later.
Yeah.
And so
that's true.
It just might have been, again, just when was it, 2023?
Yeah.
We might have just went by the wayside again.
Yeah, it was really insane when you think about, like, when this is off topic, but speaking of Netflix, like Stranger Things, the last season came out, I had just started working at George's. Just started back at George's. So that's like how long ago the last season was. And that was like
and it
2.5
first came out when we met.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it'll be, when the show comes out, it will have been going on for 9 years. Which is, I mean, it spanned the decade of the 80s. So I mean, I guess maybe that was not intentional. They had no intention of doing that, but
it was not.
It was because of the pandemic. I agree. I remember seeing the preview. I remember being like, "Oh yeah, we should watch that," and then we just never watched it. 2023, January 2023. Yeah, you were probably like right back into work stuff. Yeah. That was probably like your first like full year kind of back into work stuff. I'm just trying to think of like, usually when shows come out like during a certain period, I'm like, oh, you were traveling, or oh, we were also that era we were going on a lot of trips, we were doing a lot of cruises. Yeah, so we're busy.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of anything specific.
Yeah,
I think it's just
kind of forgot about it.
That is probably
there's just so many shows. A new show gets introduced every day, and we forget about the good ones, and we have to be reminded of it, and that's a good reason why we do this podcast. So.
And then we're also really bad at watching reruns of old things that we love.
We do like to do that.
So
we're both pretty. Yes. All right. So Georgia, the mother, has a motto, and she learned it. I'll talk about like where she learned the motto from. But she says, you catch more flies with honey, but if you catch a bee, sting first. I mean, I think the first part's kind of unnecessary. I think you just say, if you catch a bee, sting first. I don't think you have to say, you catch more flies with honey. I think that's just trying to have a clever saying. But
it's a famous saying that,
catch more flies with honey.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you want to be nice to people, and they'll be nice to you back. But if you catch...
Or if you're messing with someone that you know is going to sting you, you got to sting first.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it. But yeah, so basically, you need to stand up for yourself. I think that's like the ultimate kind of basic summarization of what that means.
Yes.
So you and I are very different people when it comes to interacting with people. I am a lot more reserved and hesitant on what I say because I'm very much like constantly overthinking everything that I'm saying and everything that I've said. And you are I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, you are so confident with your words and you are so confident when you speak to people. And you're not afraid, you're not afraid to admit when you're wrong. And like, there's that. So it's not like you're not completely like Julia Sugarbaker, who I feel is a Terminator, but also like never thinks she's wrong. So like that was her fatal flaw. That, and she was a sex shamer. We're not getting into that, but like, but you are so confident with yourself, and I've always kind of struggled with my like self-confidence and standing up for myself. But there were times when I was younger, and there have been times in my adult life where I have stood up for myself. Can you think of a time, like a big moment where you stood up for yourself?
Well, yeah, a couple of them have to do with work. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think sometimes, particularly in the workplace, especially as a woman, you tend to get railroaded by employers, especially male employers, unfortunately. I think there's also a lot to be said about especially single women in the workplace, and single women also who do not have children, which is all three of me at the time before, obviously, I met and married you. And I think a lot of times there are times when employers will give you more work and no extra pay or salary or benefits for doing the work. And there was a point many years ago that I stood up for myself. The boss that I had at the time, who was actually no longer with the company that I still work for, kept giving me extra work. And it was for several reasons. It was semi-retaliatory for some things, but also just because he knew I wouldn't say no. He knew that I would do it because he knew that I had wanted a promotion eventually. And he would say things like, oh, this will look really good. This will look good on your resume. This will look good to upper management. And it might have, but he kept always doing that. He was never spreading the wealth among my colleagues. And finally, I just said no one day. I was like, no, I can't take that on. And I said, you need to give it to someone else. Someone else needs to take that. I've done too many extra projects, and, I didn't come back at him with anything, sassy or insubordinate, like I'm not getting paid any extra for this, which I probably could have said. I mean, in my mind, I probably should have said it. But I think a lot of times I think I've said this on the pod is I really don't like the word confrontation, because I think a lot of people think having a conversation with someone about something that you disagree with has to be a fight, has to be a confrontation. And it doesn't. It's simply, we do not share the same opinion, or we have a difference of opinion, but let's talk about it. We don't have to yell. We don't have to be ugly. And I think I've learned a lot over time, because I'll admit, like, I have definitely overreacted at work and, gotten, of course, chastising from a boss over it. But I will definitely say that I really think out what I want to say and have an idea of what I also want to get accomplished in the conversation. I mean, just the other day, my boss asked me to do something that was not in the purview of my job. And I was like, that's your job. That's not my job. You're the boss. You're supposed to do that. And again, I was very respectful when I said it. And she kind of got on my case about it. And I stood firm. I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. That's not my job. And we left the call, and I was like, whatever, I still stand firm on what I said. And about 2 days later, she sent me a message that she wanted to talk to me before she left for her vacation. And I was like, oh gosh, what am I in trouble for? Because, she never calls when, unless we have a scheduled appointment and or a scheduled one-on-one. And so when she called me, she said, I just wanted to talk about what happened the other day during our, earlier week one-on-one, and I want to apologize.
Oh, wow.
And I was really taken aback, because I was really waiting to be in trouble, honestly.
Gotcha.
Like, I was waiting for her to be like, no, you need to do this. You need to stay an extra day, because what she was asking involved me staying an extra day in a territory that wasn't even mine.
Oh, wow.
I'm covering for someone, and again, trying to help the company out, and we're all having to do it. So it's not just me, but an extra day in someone else's territory takes me out of mine. And, away from my house, away from our home, and anything that I also need to do. And so she did apologize, and
that's good.
Of course, she was trying to make it sound like she was doing it because she thinks I'm great. And she was like, well, you're so good at negotiating, and you're really good at those relationships. And I said, yeah, I know. It comes with 26 years of experience. It didn't happen overnight.
Exactly.
And again, that is what your job is to, build out your team and teach them those skills and those abilities to communicate and convey those skills to the customer. And it ended on a good note. But again, I stood firm on what I believed was correct, and I still stand firm on that. So what about you?
One that comes to mind, because I was trying to think of, like, working in the restaurant industry, it's really hard to decipher when were times that you stood up for yourself and when were times that you just like screamed back at someone. So I mean, like it's kind of hard to. I'm not saying that to be funny. Like I mean, that really is kind of how it. That really is kind of how it is in the restaurant industry. It is very. You kind of say what you have to say, and then you're kind of fine 30 minutes later. Like it's usually things are said in the heat of the moment because you're busy or you're stressed out or whatever. And I mean, like, I'm sure I've stood up for myself at times, but nothing like pops in my head. I think what I always had issues with were authority figures growing up, particularly men. I know why, because like I grew up in a very, I would say a very like conservative upbringing, not necessarily with my parents, but just in general, just growing up in the South in general. It's just very conservative down here, and I'm not coming at anyone's politics. I'm just telling you what I experienced. Just got to say it. But I always had issues dealing with male authority figures because I just felt like everything was a pissing contest. Even as a child, I was always just like, when I had to deal with like male teachers or a coach or something like that, I'm always just like, what is your problem? And, you know, I was always just like, what's wrong with you? Like, we're kids, you know. I'm just kind of sitting here thinking that. And also like dealing with the fragile male ego my whole life and just kind of not myself being concerned with that. I've always just kind of lived in my own little world and never really cared about looking tough or looking like quote unquote a man or whatever that means. So I always had issues with that, and particularly when I was in probably like elementary and middle school, probably like during the beginning of me like becoming a teenager and becoming hormonal and starting to like speak up and act out. I had a 6th grade, I had a PE coach. He was our elementary school PE coach, but he was like the boys PE coach. And I mean, just flat out, he was an ass. Like I'm assuming he was, because he talked about it all the time, he was a college athlete and it didn't work out for him. Oh. And because he talked about it all the time, and how I don't even remember where he went to school, somewhere in Louisiana, and he played, I think it was football, and he talked about it all the time. So clearly he wanted more to happen with that, and it didn't happen. I'm sure he got a random degree in something at whatever college he was at and became a PE coach. He was just an asshole. I mean, like, there was just no other kind of way to put it. He was a very stereotypical gym teacher that you would kind of imagine written in fiction or on a TV show. So there was just one time when we would play dodgeball, which is already brutal enough, especially back in the 90s and before, when we weren't really concerned with, we weren't using the soft little blue balls that they use now. We were using the funk, you know, when they hit you, fink, you know, that noise that you make, the big red bouncy, you know, kickball, and it hurt when it hit you. So if there was a certain side that wasn't doing well, or if like one of them had like low numbers, this coach would come in to the losing side of the team and basically annihilate all the kids. So the losing team would win. Oh, wow. Which was like really stupid, but it was just his way to flex. I mean, it was just his way to be whatever he was. And so I got really tired of it because I thought it was unfair. I'm like, just let them lose like fairly because our side is winning. Or when he'd come on our side, I'm like, I felt like a punk because the coach is coming in and like winning it for us. Like, it just felt like, dude, you're not in this PE class. Like, you're our coach. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't funny. Like, he wasn't like lightly throwing things. I mean, he was putting full force into these throws. And wow. I mean, like, it was, I think I've told people this like a few times, and like, it's not that they don't believe me. They're just like, whoa. And I'm like, this is real. This was out of private school. This is the education my parents were paying for. And, and so something I've always been good at, even when I was playing football with my friends or whatever, I will put myself in harm's way to prove a point, and I will put myself in harm's way to just, I don't know, make a point. Or sometimes I get really competitive, and I don't care about what happens to my body if I want to win something. I'll get really, really competitive. So one time he came in and he was on the other team, and I was like, I remember getting pissed. Like, I remember getting pissed. I'm like, of course, here he comes to show everyone how hard he can throw. And so I'm like, I'm going to catch it. I don't care how hard it hurts. I don't care how far back I go. I'm going to catch this ball. And so I remember making myself like kind of vulnerable on purpose. Like, everyone was kind of like shifting one way and I would shift the other way. I'm like, I want him to throw it at me. And I was like, if I end up looking stupid, I'm going to look really stupid. Like, if I end up missing this, I'm going to look really dumb. So I was like, okay. And so I remember, like, I was kind of like by myself, and he saw me, and then I was waiting for it, and he threw it. I remember it hitting me right here, and then I just hugged it as fast as I could. And the force, because I was so little, I went back and hit my back up against like the little matted wall that's like always in the gym.
Yeah.
And I just remember going, and I just remember like going like that, and like he just stopping, and I just went, and I could barely breathe, but I pointed at him and went, "You're out." And so afterwards, he was not happy about it. He thought that I was being a poor sport. And because I yelled at him and said that he was out, he was mad because I called it and everyone cheered. Like, it was because of that. It's like my one like sports moment, and it was in PE and it was dodgeball. And I remember he like was like, "Hey Jeff, come here for a second." He's like, "Okay." And he tried to tell me that I wasn't. Let me try to word this right, because it's words that like I don't think about a lot, but like I never forgot them. He said something along the lines of like, when you accomplish something, you have to like be a man about it or something like that, but you weren't acting like a man, so I want you to go finish PE out with the girls. And I said no. I was like, I'm absolutely not doing that. And I said something like that, and he just kind of looked at me. I'm like, don't get mad because I caught the ball. Like, I caught the ball. Like, get over it. I said something like that. I just remember like not thinking about what I was saying, because I remember looking at the other guys and they were like, what are you saying to this guy? And I didn't get in trouble. I didn't get in any more trouble. I think he made me like go and sit and would let me like play dodgeball for the rest of class. But I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I was just like, you are humiliating me because I embarrassed you, and I am a child. And so I think this is one of the many reasons why I am not nostalgic over the 90s, because this is the that I think about.
Oh gosh.
About the 90s, when everyone's like, oh man, TV, movies, music. I'm like, you can find that now. You can go on Hulu, you can go on YouTube, you can go on iTunes, Spotify, you can hear all that stuff, watch all that old stuff. I think about the memories of living in the 90s, and I mean, like, I had a fun childhood, but there's so much about it that I'm like, God, that was such a messed up era of kind of the last era of kind of allowing strange adults to discipline your children and like not thinking twice about it. And in that perspective, I'm glad parents are a little bit more protective nowadays. I'm actually glad. I wish that the children weren't so coddled, but yes, I am glad that parents are more involved and they care that like a stranger like disciplines their child, because I don't fully agree with that. Okay, so talked about that. We both have our parents were both very, well, I know my mom was a very, I don't want to say overprotective, because I don't think she was that overprotective, but she was a very like protective over us, just in a very general maternal way. And I would say your mom was the same for you and your siblings.
Yeah, probably.
Was there a time that like your mom, because Georgia like kind of jumps in and helps out and helps her kids out and fights some of her kids' battles. Is there a time that your mom stood up for you?
Probably a couple of times, but actually more vivid ones, and actually not more vivid ones because I don't even think I was maybe even alive yet. No, I was probably alive. So my brother was bullied in junior high and kind of in the neighborhood where kids would like steal his money or his lunch money at school. And so my mother sort of discovered it because I think he had gone to the librarian at our junior high and asked the librarian if he could borrow money for lunch. And the librarian was actually friends with my mom. My mom knew like everybody at our schools, like teachers, administration, and staff. Like she was a volunteer. And so the librarian had actually told my mom about it. And then I think she found out that he had gone to like the Time Saver around that corner from our house. And the same guys from the school took his money. He was going to go get like an icy or something, like he had, earned that from my mom, and he came back and he didn't have the icy that he had gone to go and buy. And those guys just happened to be at the Time Saver and took his money. Well, my mom, and this is according to my sister.
Okay.
So my mom walked over to the Time Saver and they were still there because that's how close this was. I mean, it was literally like behind our house.
Yeah.
And my mom walked over to the Time Saver, and again, totally different time in the 70s.
Yeah.
My mom tracked the kids down and smacked them and got my brother's money back.
Nice.
And of course, my mom later on in life was like, oh my God, I'd be like arrested today.
Yeah.
But the other thing was that she did for him was she enrolled him in the YMCA in judo and karate lessons. And he was able to then fight and fend for himself.
Are you telling my brother-in-law is the Karate Kid?
Yes. So, and hey, Seth taught judo lessons for quite some time after that. So yeah, my mom was a big believer in us standing up for ourselves. I don't know if she would have condoned my brother, taking these kids out, but apparently she might have, because she signed him up for judo and karate lessons.
Yeah, I mean, if he was defending himself. Yeah.
Right. Like she wouldn't have been like, yeah, now you can go fight.
Go start
people,
some fights.
but, yeah, that wasn't it. But I think my mom was always very like about the right path of things. Like I had been accused of cheating in high school and went through like the honor board, and I had like said some bad stuff to the vice principal, and then she disciplined me for that.
You've told you told that story on the pod.
Yes.
Nick applauded you for it.
Yes. And so one of the punishments that I ended up getting was I was removed as an officer from one of the service organizations that I was a member of. And my mom felt that that was wrong, because one of the things that was supposedly so important about the honor board and the whole honor system was that it was private, that you weren't supposed to know if anyone had ever been seen in front of them, what the discipline was, or, what was talked about.
Yeah. And
so my mom, when it was all said and done, my mom went to the school and was like, look, I get it. I get if she has a month worth of detentions or whatever her other punishments are, but this is something that service provided, and like she does a good job with it. And my mom was a very big believer in volunteerism and helping others, and, especially, service wise. So my mom felt that that was wrong. She did not win. They still removed me from that club. And I was like, whatever, but my mom just felt like, in principle, the whole point of the honor code and the honor system was that the whole process was supposed to be private, as well as the discipline in and of itself, whether it be like I failed a class or got detention or whatever it would have been. She felt like whatever it was should have been only between like me and the school, or me and my family, and removing me from a pretty prominent position of a big student group in the school was obviously not private, because I had to tell people. I had to be like, well, they removed me from this, and people asked why. And so it was kind of a crazy time, and I appreciated my mom, because I will tell you now, my mom didn't come up to school for any and everything. Like, I failed algebra when I was a junior. That happened senior year, but when I was a junior, I failed algebra, and my mom was like, I guess you're going to summer school. She didn't come to fight me failing algebra. She was like,
yeah, same.
Like, why didn't you ask for help before that? So
same.
It was never over anything that I had done to my own self.
Right.
Whereas she was fighting the principle of the whole honor system and the process. What about you?
One that comes to mind, it came up during one of our previous episodes recently, but I said I'll talk about it on this episode.
Oh, okay.
So we already went through we already had the episode where I talk about all the different jobs I've had. So like I worked at McDonald's in high school, and it was I've talked about it before. There were, it was a normal fast food job. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. And I had put in my 2 weeks because I was going to go work somewhere else. I don't remember. And I put in my 2 weeks, and I remember like my car had broken down. Like my car wasn't running. I had an old Mazda 626 that ran 50% of the time, and it was getting worked on, or my dad was working on it or something. So I didn't have a ride to work, and it was like I like just put in my 2 weeks, and so I was like, but I was still going to work. I'm like, I'm not gonna not come in. But I was having issues getting a ride to work because I had parents that worked. So, like, I didn't, I was a latchkey kid. I would, come home. I took the bus home, and I remember, like, just trying to find a ride to work. And I remember calling McDonald's and being like, I'm having problems, like, coming to work, like, getting a ride to work. As soon as I can find a ride, like, I'll be there. And this wasn't even, like, I still had, like, an hour before my shift started. So I was like, I still had some time, but I'm like, I'm just letting y'all know, like, I'm trying to find a ride. And then one of the managers, like, I guess it was one of the crew members, maybe like one of the like lower level managers that were there, that were like telling like the store manager that was there what was going on. And he takes the phone. He's like, hey, Jeff, you put in your 2 weeks, so we can just call it a day. And then just like hung up the phone. And so, I mean, I'm 17, so I'm just kind of like, whatever, I'm just kind of like, screw this guy. I was like, I put in my 2 weeks. So a little while later, I get a phone call from one of my friends, and they're going to I was a junior, but our high school, our senior graduation was that night. And I got a call from one of my friends. We're like, hey, do you still need a ride to work? And I was just like, apparently not. I'm like, no. And he was like, oh, well, if you don't need a ride to work, we're going to PMAC or to see everyone graduate. You want to come? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I left my mom a note, because that's what you did back then. Left my mom a note saying what happened, kind of brief thing that happened, that I'm going to graduation. I'll be back at around this time. And I don't know what got into my mom. I don't know why this made her so mad. Love to ask her one day, but she's talked about it before. But she decided to call, and my mom has never done this before or after. She only did it this one time, where I kind of made a comment about like parents who call their kids' workplace and kind of campaign for them or defend them. I'm like, I'm not completely on board, but my mom did it to me. But since she never did it, it was just so like out of left field when I came home. And she was like, yeah, I came home, and she was like, yeah, I called McDonald's.
Oh, no.
And I was just like, okay. And she was like, yeah, I kind of just told she's like, what's his name? Mike. I just heard her say that. I'm like,
Mike.
I'm like, yeah, his name's Mike. And she was like, yeah, well, I called and told him, I was like, you fired my son, or she said something like that. And he was like, and I was just letting him know that like you were telling the truth and that you weren't just making up an excuse, because I'm sure he hears excuses all the time. But I told him that like you didn't have your car and you were trying to find a ride, and he apologized to me, and I'm just like, cool, thanks. So it was like one of those times where like I didn't need her to stand up for me, but it was like, honestly, like it felt good. It felt good that like my mom did that, because she didn't have to. I feel like it's more appreciated with that, because I mean, like, if I did something wrong and then my mom came to the school and defended me for that, I would feel bad because I fucked up, and she's defending me for no reason, or she's defending me just because I'm her son. But the fact that like this really wasn't that big of a deal, and she's still like kind of went to bat for me, I was like, my mom loves me. It's like kind of like one of those moments. Yeah, my parents were not super confrontational. I was about to say they weren't super involved, but people always take that the wrong way. But like, my parents just weren't up our asses in our lives. Like they just kind of, like for a while my parents were, because I kind of went through like my bad kid phase. But like, other than that, like my parents just kind of left us alone. Kind of like just let us live our lives, and if we really had an issue, we'd go to them. But for the most part, like we kind of just figured it out on our own, and we kind of just figured it out for ourselves. But yeah, that's like a time where like I really remember my mom or any of my parents sticking up for me in that way. Now it's like a funny memory, and we talk about it every now and then. I'm sure she told you the story at some point. But yeah, that's just a little memory of Gigi.
Yeah.
All right, so there's a little kind of thing on Ginny and Georgia with their names.
Yes.
Her name is the mom's
fake
name is Georgia. Ginny's full name is Virginia, and then the brother's name is Austin. She named him after the cities or states that they were born in. And it kind of got us thinking about like the origins of our name.
Yes.
So your name is Anna Melissa.
Yes.
Where did those names come from? Where did your parents come up with that name?
Yeah, so actually both of my grandmothers are named Anna. So that is where that first name came from.
Gotcha.
I have probably like 5 other cousins named Anna, so it's not super original. But then my middle name is Melissa, so there is a little bit of like reasoning to this, which is cute because of Ginny and Georgia. Melissa means honeybee.
Aww.
And Anna means graceful, so cute. I'm graceful honeybee.
Gara means war.
And Gara means war. But so I think, and I never remember which one it was, but I think it was my mom wanted Melissa and my dad wanted Priscilla. Melissa, I think my mom just wanted an M middle name, but to make me different than all my cousins that were named Anna Maria. Because I had 4 or 5 cousins named Anna Maria. And so my mom wanted the Anna, but with the M, but with something besides Marie or Maria. So Melissa was the choice. But also very popular at the end of the 60s was Priscilla Presley, who was married to Elvis. And so I think my dad wanted that. I can't remember which one wanted which. However, I became Anna Melissa, so I always joked that it was either going to be Missy or Prissy, and so I became Missy. So my whole family mostly called me Missy or Melissa because I did have so many other cousins named Anna.
Gotcha.
What about you?
Well, I kind of had to ask my mom this because when you first posed this question, I loved the question, but then when you were like, where did your parents come up with Jeffrey? I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just like, I have no idea. So my middle name is Lloyd. That is a family name. It is my dad's first name. It was my his dad's middle name, and it was my great grandmother's maiden name.
Gotcha.
I believe that's whose maiden name it was. So it started with that. And it means gray hair or gray haired man. It's very much like this happens to me all the time when we're talking about names and stuff like that, and I'm in a social situation, like, yeah, what's your middle name? And I say Lloyd. They're not so much anymore, but there used to always just kind of be because it's not a common name at all.
Yeah.
It's mostly used as a last name. And so like I'd always kind of get like, okay, that's not weird.
So many names are so different.
Not weird. I know. Well, now that's why I said now it's not a big deal. But when I was younger, or when I was like a teenager, maybe a little bit older than that, anytime my middle names would come up and I'd tell them mine, it'd always just be like, oh, okay, like that's unique. And of course now it's the most plain name ever compared to the names that are current.
Yeah.
So I did not know where Jeffrey came from with my parents. We don't have anyone in our family named Jeffrey. We don't have any close friends named Jeffrey. So I went out and asked my mom, and she responded with, I had no idea that I was named after Jeff. What's his last name? From LaRouge?
It's LaRue.
LaRue. I'm sorry. I keep saying LaRouge. LaRue.
Yeah, it's the band LaRue.
Yeah.
Who sang New Orleans Ladies.
New Orleans Lady, there
yes,
it is.
I forgot. Jeff,
is it Pollard, maybe?
Yes.
And I was named after Jeff, but my parents apparently really enjoyed this band and really loved this band, and my mom really liked the name. I think she liked the name Jeff, but she was like, well, it was kind of like we wanted to name her Maddie, but we were like, we have to give her a full name. I think that was, so they named me Jeffrey because of that. And really convenient because it means tranquility or heavenly peace, and your last name means war.
Yes.
I just always thought that was kind of funny.
War and peace.
War and peace.
We were meant to be.
And my last name, Colvin, is Scottish for a Scottish term for coal miners.
Yes.
So that was actually a really interesting.
Do you know what your name would have been if you were going to be a girl?
So supposedly, I don't know if this is real. But what I was told was if I was a girl, my parents were thinking about Claire.
Aww.
Which is funny if you've seen Breakfast Club. But,
of course, that was very popular.
But yeah,
80s.
it was, or, the Boutique. But yeah.
All your piercings, that's why.
Yeah, that was it.
Yes, I would have been named because my uncle, my dad's brother, only had girls. So there was no one on his side to carry the Guerra name. My brother was the only son of his. And although my brother has not had any children of his own, my parents were going to name me Luis for him and the middle name Fernando. And his middle name was Felipe, Luis Felipe, and I was going to be Luis Fernando Guerra, but I'm really glad I'm a girl.
Same. All right, ready to get into this plot summary?
Let's do this.
All right. It's an hour long. I tried to compress this as much as I could.
Oh my gosh.
It looks like a lot. It's not. It's because I had to space out the paragraphs.
Okay.
All right. Ginny and Georgia plot summary. At her school in Texas, Ginny mentions how she got the sex talk when she was 7 years old from her mother. Her mom went on to tell Ginny that in the end, all men want is sex, and that she should always get something in return. She calls it a really effective sex talk because she's still a virgin. Ginny then receives bad news that her stepfather has been in an accident and he didn't make it. So at her stepfather's funeral, Georgia, who is Ginny's mother, has the tears flowing, but all around them the guest whispers that she was in the marriage for the money. Sometime later, Georgia has decided that they need to leave their lives in Texas behind and have a fresh start somewhere else. The place that Georgia has decided to move her family to is in Massachusetts in a small town called Wellsbury. When they arrive at the town, Ginny clearly likes it, while Georgia checks out the men. At their new home, their neighbor from across the street introduces herself as Ellen, and after having a meltdown over catching her son Marcus smoking weed in public, eventually Georgia reveals she gave birth to Ginny, her first child, at 15 years old. Later that night, Ginny happens to notice Marcus across the road sneaking out of his room, and she's instantly interested. The next morning, Georgia gets to know the other mothers on the first day at school. Rather quickly, Georgia easily adapts to her new environment. Austin, her youngest child, is nervous about his first day of school. Other parents introduce themselves to Georgia, with the leader of this group of parents mentioning that they are worried about the fast food options being offered to their kids. That just makes me think of Bad Moms.
Oh, yeah.
George, yeah, that's exactly who that character reminds me of. Christina Applegate from
That's funny, yeah.
And the woman that plays that was in a season of Slasher we both like. Georgia pretends that she cares and accepts the invitation to a meeting this group of parents will have with the town's mayor to discuss the issue. Meanwhile, Ginny attends her first class, and despite many times she corrects her teacher, he insists on calling her Virginia, which is her full name and not Ginny. Eventually, she gets fed up with the way the teacher treats her that she decides to speak her mind. Thus, she proceeds to tell her teacher that the syllabus is white male dominated, and she wants to be receiving a more stimulating education. The teacher says he doesn't like political grandstanding and outbursts. However, Maxine, one of her fellow classmates, puts her hand up and defends Ginny. After a class, Marcus introduces himself to Ginny. He tells her that her mother asked for weed off him. Maxine tells Marcus to leave her new friend alone and then reveals he is her twin brother. She introduces Ginny to her friends and asks them to be nice. Georgia decides to check out one of the popular restaurants in town in hopes of meeting Paul Randolph, the town's mayor. When he walks in to get his favorite order to go, Georgia stands up and acts like it was an accident that she accidentally knocked over his food. She offers to pay for his lunch and eat with him. Paul talks about the cafe owner, Joe, who also runs a farm where he helps kids intern in agriculture, and he apparently makes great hummus. Georgia and Paul enjoy their lunch. Eventually, Georgia asks if she can help him in politics and calls herself a fast learner. While paying for the meal, her card is declined, so Paul pays and tells her he isn't hiring right now. Ginny heads to Maxine's house to hang out. Maxine asks Ginny if she's ever had a boyfriend because her friend Hunter is interested. Ginny reveals she's never had a boyfriend. She then talks about her mother and how she always wants to find a guy, and then they move time and time again as a result. Maxine tells her not to move again because she likes her. At the house, and while Maxine leaves the room momentarily, Marcus asks Ginny if she's stalking him and walks up to her. She's extremely nervous being close to him, but he was grabbing some weed that was stashed in her sister's room. When Ginny leaves Maxine's house, she cheekily gets on Marcus's motorbike and rides it around the block. Marcus is angry, but Ginny kisses him to calm him down. After the kiss, another girl arrives to pick Marcus up. When Ginny returns home, Georgia is furious at her and tells her to stay away from Marcus and that she taught her to have a better life. Ginny says that she saw her with a new man today and slams the door in her face. Georgia's card keeps getting declined, so she rings her lawyer Marty about her deceased husband Kenny's money. She says it is hers and wants him to sort it out. Marty reveals that Kenny's ex-wife believes she used him for the money, and at school she gets her son Austin to punch Zach in the nose because he broke his glasses. Georgia then pretends that Zach had a nosebleed and brings him to her mother, his mother, who is the head of the PTA, the mom that we said was like Christina Applegate. Maxine arranges a date between Hunter and Ginny, who admits to being nervous because she's never been on a date before. But then Ginny is embarrassed even further as her mother shows up to school so they can make up after their recent argument. They enjoy a car picnic where she asks Ginny for forgiveness. Eventually, Georgia admits that she saw Ginny making the same mistake she did when she witnessed Ginny on Marcus's bike, which brought back memories with the boys she got involved with. Ginny tells her mother that Marcus is a jerk and has her first ever date with someone. Georgia hopes the boy is a Zuckerberg. Hunter wants to get straight to talk about their lives on the date. Ginny is surprisingly enjoying herself. When Hunter drops her off, Ginny gets super nervous, and instead of kissing her, he hugs her instead. Georgia hoots at them, and Ginny is furious at the lack of boundaries. Later on, Ellen heads over to hang out with Georgia and bring with her Marcus's weed, which was a really funny scene when they were getting high on the balcony. Ellen reveals that Maxine is gay. Georgia states that Austin's father is in prison after she framed him. Ellen can't tell if she's joking, but they both laugh over this comment. The two mothers then head to the parent group meeting that the mayor chairs, which was really funny, them walking in and they're so clearly stoned. That was really funny. Georgia introduces Joe to the room and tells the parents that he owns a farm and will provide a healthy, locally grown, organic lunch option to the school district. However, Joe reveals that Georgia blackmailed him by reporting him for having unpaid interns work full-time if he didn't agree, which is kind of funny.
It was great.
The mayor is impressed with Georgia after helping him out of a tight spot and asks her if she can start working for him. Later that night, Marcus sneaks into Ginny's bedroom. This guy is bad news. I'm just saying it right now. This guy is bad news.
It's like he was just with another girl.
And asks if she likes Hunter. She tells him she does, but then he kisses her. He tells her he can't stop thinking about her, so Ginny returns the kiss, and they hook up. The teens get in bed together, and they have sex. However, as Ginny is about to tell him that she just lost her virginity, Marcus tells her that he's got to get going. He also wants her to keep it a secret because of Padma, obviously his girlfriend. Plus, he doesn't want Ginny to ruin her chances with Hunter. So we're kind of, throughout the episode, we're kind of having like flashbacks to Georgia's past. It's kind of running parallel with the story. So we have years earlier, so Georgia has a flashback. Years earlier, a younger Georgia is being attacked by her father. She escapes the house, and eventually a woman notices her black eye and tells her that she should sting first if she sees a bee. Teenage Georgia ends up at a bar and talks to another teenager named Zion, who has a fake ID to drink some alcohol. He buys her a beer, and the pair hit it off very quickly. Sometime later, Ginny tells Georgia that Kenny is not her father. So we have another flashback. This is when Kenny is still alive, and this is like, I guess, when Georgia and Kenny first got married. And so I guess they were doing yoga at this point, and Kenny comes in, and Georgia had left the room, and you see him getting handsy with Ginny, who we're assuming is like 14, 15 years old at this time. Regardless, Kenny's a creep. So we figure that out. At school, Ginny sees Marcus hooking up with his girlfriend against the locker. In that moment, Ginny mentions how her mother always talked about power and control. She realizes that after the passion she felt towards Marcus doesn't pan out like she hoped, now power is starting to look good. She approaches Padma and tells her she has something on her shirt. Marcus gets nervous with this exchange, believing Ginny was going to reveal the two of them had sex. But then Ginny states that for the first time in her life, she's starting to understand her mother. Sometime earlier, as the last thing we see is Georgia. She's gardening in the front yard, and we see a flashback, and she sees Kenny being appropriate towards Ginny, like touching her and crossing touching her inappropriately, crossing so many boundaries. And we see Georgia gave Kenny a protein shake with wolfsbane blended into it before he left the house.
Which is a flower.
Yes. As he was driving, the wolfsbane mixed into the smoothie caused him to have a heart attack, and he died. End of episode. So we have secrets, we got scandal, we got murder, we got cover-ups, we got fake names. I mean...
Sex.
We got sex. Yeah, I mean, like, the show... I mean, I would definitely be interested in watching the second season. I would definitely be interested in kind of continuing watching the show. It kind of
especially since the third season should be coming out soon. Like
Yeah.
if we watch the second one, we'll just be catching up to the release of the third season. Because I really don't remember why we didn't watch it, because we did watch the whole first season.
We liked it. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we'll just have to sit down and watch it one day.
Yeah.
All right, you think about wraps this up? Talking for almost an hour.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Wrap it up so you can get in bed, my poor boo.
Are you not going to get in bed?
Of course I'm going to get in bed.
Okay.
Don't
just blame me.
I feel bad for you because you've had a long day and you're tired. Sorry, I care about you.
Okay.
Well, that about wraps up this episode of We Judge a Show. Let me start that over. Well, that about wraps up this episode of We Judge a Show by its pilot. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on whichever platform you're listening to this podcast on. That way you'll be notified every time we publish a new episode. You can also follow us on Instagram at We Judge Pilot Pod. We're also on Facebook. You can leave us a comment, suggest a show for us to watch, or leave some emojis in the comments. What you got?
All right, for Ginny and Georgia, I've got the flower for the wolfsbane, a car, the motorcycle, the peach for Georgia, a teacher, the kiss, the heart, the coffee, the twins, the credit card, beer, and a bed.
For the sex.
For the sex. All right, well, we're going to head out now, but we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.